for 14 years. During those years, he has done so much for our communities that very few people will ever know what the total impact will ever be. Whip never tried to take public credit for the projects and the good works he sponsored in our communities. Where others talked about problems, Whip performed with his action, and this is the core of what Whip Saltmarsh is all about. All of you here tonight can draw upon past experiences on how much he has given to us personally and ask for nothing in return. Well, tonight, Whip, it's our turn to give back to you just a small token of our admiration and appreciation for everything you've done for us. So on behalf of everybody here tonight, thank you very much.
Tonight is a night to talk about Whip Saltmarsh, someone who I've known both when I was a member of the House and when I was in leadership in the House and then moving over to the Senate. When Whip told me that he wasn't going to run again, it was like losing a close friend. Not because of the fact that Whip's a Republican and I'm a Democrat, but the fact of the things that he has done in the legislature. It's been mentioned of many things that he's done while on the Committee on Transportation. It's too bad that so often credit isn't given until the time when someone leaves the legislature or goes on to other things. Basically, if you look at what has happened with the Peawood program, with the parking programs in the state, with so many new innovations in the T, and every single one of them has Whip's handprint on them. Many of my colleagues in the legislature here tonight to honor Whip. I come here as a friend, not as a colleague. As a friend because so often in politics you meet so many different types. But when you have a person of the caliber and the competence and the trustworthy, and most of all being a loyal friend, I think that's what government and that's what people are about. I hate to see Whip go, and I know you do as you sit here tonight and enjoy this evening. I wish him the best of luck, and I only wish that he would stay or had decided to stay, because when we lose people like Whip in government, it's a tragedy for the whole Commonwealth. Whip, best of luck from all of your colleagues in the Massachusetts House and Senate.
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I would like to introduce the head table. We have some absentees that are on their way, one of whom has notified us. And let me start on my left and on your right. And the first one is the empty chair. And the empty chair belongs to Mr. James O'Leary, who is a very good friend of Whip Saltmarsh's, who's the general manager of the MBTA. And we understand that from his office that his train has been delayed. And we expect him momentarily. On Mr. O'Leary's right is a very fine couple from the western part of Massachusetts, Representative Iris Holland and her husband Gilbert. Mrs. Holland is a former minority whip and hails from East Longmeadow. On her right, also an absent person, but somebody we also understand is on their way, maybe on the same train with Mr. O'Leary, is Mr. and Mrs. Joe Morgan. Joe Morgan is the manager of the Boston Red Sox and is also a former teammate of Whip Saltmarsh playing hockey at Boston College, and we expect him to join us shortly. On his right, somebody who took the time to come Whip, is the hockey coach from Boston College, Len Sogolarski. And on his right, I'm sure a familiar face to many of the football fans cross country, none other than the coach of Boston College's football team, Jack Bicknell. Jack Bicknell. On my right and your left, starting at the end of the table, former aluminum siding salesman, And, and now pastor of St. Patrick's Church, Father John Mark Hannon. Father Hannon. That's enough, Father. Bless you. There are 2 empty seats at the end of the table, which will shortly be filled by 2.5 people. I'll say that because he isn't here. George Kavarian, who is the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and Charlie Flaherty, who is the Majority Leader. Both of those gentlemen are attending the freshman dinner, I think it is, with our new representative, Paul Casey, and they will be here within the hour and a half. And they will be on our speaking program, whether we want them to be or not. On the good father's left, somebody who really deserves equal honor this evening, and somebody who the constituents of Winchester and Stoneham in particular have learned to appreciate over the years, is the administrative assistant to Whip Saltmarsh for the last 14 years, Bobby Lee Rogers. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's fair to say that for any of us who really know Whip Saltmarsh, we know that the brains in the office are Bobby Lee. None for me, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very large speaking program this evening, and in fact, I think everybody here is speaking. We have a portrait here behind the good father who has agreed to assist me in the unveiling. We have this particular portrait. I'll tell you when to stand, Father. This is a single. This particular portrait was made up especially for Whip by Anna and Filippo Frateroli, the owners of Lucia's, and I think is really something that represents the friendship that a lot of us feel towards Whip and what he has done for the folks of Stoneham and Winchester. Father?
I thought you'd never finish.
Good evening. Good evening to all of Whip's friends and supporters. I'd like to extend a hand in friendship to all of you and to tell you how pleased I am to be here tonight to the tribute in honor of Whip Saltmarsh, one of my best friends in the legislature. We all feel this way about Whip. He's a very special person. He's done so much for the people of this community and for the Commonwealth as a whole. I had been the Republican Whip, the first woman to be elected to a position in leadership in the 350-year history of the Massachusetts legislature. And Whip and I had worked, thank you. And Whip and I worked very closely together. We worked on issues, we took positions on various votes, and I would look up at the rostrum, I would look up at the voting machine sometimes, although I didn't check up on them all the time. I would look up at the voting machine and I would find that Whip and I were voting exactly the same. And so I want to say to all of you from Stoneham and from Winchester, you have a very fine legislator who will be succeeding Whip. No one can ever take his place. You have a very fine legislator who will be succeeding Whip. And if you'd like a substitute legislator who would have voted as Whip would have voted, please count on me. I'm in room 275 at the State House. My name is in the book, my telephone number is in the book. I offer my services to you and to Whip. We all love him dearly. We have a great deal of appreciation and admiration for him. I salute my fellow legislators sitting over here and the staff of the Transportation Committee, and know that each of us is going to miss him a great deal, just as you are. We wish him the very best, and we hope to see more of him in the future. Thanks so much for the invitation of being here this evening.
I think we all know how dedicated and experienced and what's this other word you wrote here at the Whip?
Want me to read that for you? I've read those many years. I'll save you some time.
I think looking back over the 14 years, I think everybody agrees how well Whip has served the town of Winchester, and he's commanded a lot of respect from the individuals in town. And I think that was best put forward about shortly after Whip announced that he wasn't running. Our fire chief, knowing that Whip was looking for a job, decided to retire, hoping that Whip would get the job. But during the interview process, one of the questions was, what would you do in case of a fire? And Whip's answer was, call your insurance man. So, as you know, we have a new fire chief, and it's not Whip. But now the police chief has decided to retire, and I think Whip has put in his application. So good luck, Whip. And if you don't make that, I heard that Nick Millay is going to retire. I've been a selectman for the last 3 years, and I've attended many functions like this with Whip usually sitting next to me, or I sitting between the Abbott and Costello show, better known as Sullivan and Saltmarsh. And I think I've always wondered how Whip is able to get up from time to time and make these speeches and give out these plaques. And Whip has always reminded me of Zsa Zsa Gabor's fifth husband. He knew what to do, but didn't know how to make it exciting. I think I'll sit down now. Good. But being very serious, as I said, I've been on the Board of Selectmen for 3 years, and I've worked with Whip. And as a resident of the town prior to that, I've known how much Whip has done for the town. I think no matter whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or an independent, I think everybody really realizes that Whip was a true representative representing the town. He wasn't on an ego trip or just trying to make headlines. Every time Whip did something, he did it for both Stoneham and Winchester. And I think all the residents of those towns can really appreciate him and say a good thank you. So Whip, tonight you received one of these instead of handing it out. And this is from the town of Winchester, and it's an official citation. It says, the entire membership extends its very best wishes and expresses the hope for future good fortune and continued success in all your endeavors. Be hereby known to all that the Board of Selectmen of the town of Winchester hereby offer its sincerest congratulations to Sherman Whip Saltmarsh, Jr., in recognition of his 14 years of service as Winchester State Representative, given this first day of December 1988 by Robert F. Deering, Thomas Smith, Judy Musier, Frank Soper, and Stephen Powers.
Thank you, John. Head table guests, it's an honor being here this evening to represent the town of Stoneham. I do have a citation to present to Whip a little later on, but due to the fact that the town of Stoneham has been running a deficit and, in 2.5, we're in really rough shape. But let me tell you a few little jokes that have happened over the years. The town of Stoneham, 2 years ago when Whip decided to run for representative, he's a wonderful guy. He cornered us. The complete Board of Selectmen are all Democrats. So what Whip did is he passed along by contacting each and every one of us. First of all, he got a hold of my vice chairman, Cosmo Ciccarello, and he said, hey, look, Chick, I know you don't like the MWRA, but I'll take care of you if I get elected. Will you endorse me? Chick endorsed him. What's Chick doing now? He's still working the same job that he's been working for years. Thanks, Whip. Then we have our great person that works in the assessing office, Elaine Moore. Whip promised her a job with the Department of Revenue. She's still in Stoneham. Thank you, Whip. Next, we have Kathleen Sullivan. Now, this is a good one because Kathleen has always been connected to law enforcement. And Whip said to her, Kathy, I've got a good job for you. I'm going to put you right into the, as a court officer into the State House. Kathy's still in Stoneham. But I'll tell you, we do have a new member, Paul Marzano, and I don't know what Whip has offered him, but Whip covered all bases. You know how he covered all bases? He's not running again. Now, but least that I do have to say is Whip did the town of Stoneham an injustice. He was very close with our former town administrator, Bill Sequino. This man has held the job the longest of any town administrator in the town of Stoneham. Now that's a tribute to you, Whip, but why did you send him down to Rhode Island? Now, Whip heard some rumors that our town administrator was leaving, so what did he do? He decided not to run. So, Whip, we do now have a opening in the town of Stoneham, and I will willing to accept your application and give you every bit of consideration. I would like to, on a serious note, Whip has done a great service to the town of Stoneham over the years, and I'm very happy that I was able to serve along with him as the representative of Stoneham in the Board of Selectmen for some 12 years. Whip has done an outstanding job, and any time that I've needed Whip, I was always able to call upon him, and hopefully that I'll be able to call upon the new representative. And let me tell you something. The complete Board of Selectmen that endorsed Whip were Democrats, and we had 2 years of holy hell, Whip, with our fellow Democrats. But let me tell you, it was well worth it, and I want to thank you and present to you this citation, Whip.
I'd like to read to you, Whip, a message from Ed Markey, Congressman, Washington, D.C. Dear Whip, I'm sorry that my schedule prevents me from attending your celebration this evening, but I send you my best regards. Whip, you're my favorite Republican. I'm sure you'll be missed on Beacon Hill, and I'm certain I speak for you and your constituents and many supporters when I say, congratulations on a job well done. Please accept my best wishes for a very happy retirement from the legislature and this token of my esteem for you.
We are very fortunate in having in our midst a fine photographer from Winchester who is known throughout the area, and he has donated to us a picture that apparently Whip admired over the years, and he has brought it here this evening, and it's a great pleasure to present to you, Whip, a third painting for your unfurnished house from Arthur Griffin.
It's a pleasure to be here this evening. I would estimate that there's about 400 people here, which means on the statewide poll, maybe 16% of you voted for the legislative pay raise, which means the vast majority of you didn't. To you people, I say up yours. Before I begin my remarks tonight, I'd like to warn you about what Whip is serving up for dessert, just in case they ask you at the hospital. But I'm delighted to have been asked to speak a few words tonight in honor of the most respected public office holder that I've ever known, one of the most loved, the most trusted, the most revered members of the House. But since Speaker Kavarian isn't here yet, I thought I'd kill a few minutes and talk about Whip. With Whip, we pay homage to a man who came into the House of Representatives with a bright and promising future and who leaves it tonight with a terrible past. The reason it occurred to me as I drove over here tonight, why is it that this Republican member is the most popular Republican in the entire House? And it occurred to me, and make no mistake about it, he is the most Republican member. And the reason he is that he's not really a Republican. You've got to figure it out for yourself. If a Republican who's born with the handle Sherman Saltmarsh is either going to be known as Sherman, Salty, or Mr. Saltmarsh. A Democrat that was born with that handle is going to immediately get himself a nickname like Whip, even if it means getting on the mailing list of Fredericks of Hollywood. Republicans go to Harvard and they go to Yale and they spend the rest of their lives being in awe of themselves. Democrats and Whip go to Boston College, where the ones who are held in awe are, like myself, those of us who won the Chug-a-Lug contest at the Tam O'Shanter, those of us who tailgate at football parties and chase tail at all other parties. Republicans play golf, like Dan Quayle. They play golf. They hit golf balls and then they hit high balls. They take long walks that are interrupted by constant disappointments and bad mathematics. Or they become country gentlemen, and their sport becomes the fox hunt. You know, you can see them now. The English country gentleman trotting off after the fox, the unspeakable after the uneatable. But Whip played hockey. It's fast, it's hard, it's tough. Republicans become chiefs of industry. They become the business tycoons. Their lives evolve around protocol, alcohol, and geritol. They want the rules enforced so that nobody can make a pile of money the same way that they made it. They think nothing should be tried for the first time. Republicans are gentlemen, though. They would never hit a woman. A Republican would never hit a woman with his hat on or without provocation. Republican holds a door while his wife walks in with the groceries. And above all, they are the upper crust. Now, Whip identifies with the common man and with the common woman, or as we would call it, the streetwalker. He's a man of the people. I mean, look at the people he's asked to speak, the great unwashed. Here we are. And above all, Whip understands the upper crust. He understands that the upper crust is usually a bunch of crumbs held together by dough. So tonight, over cocktails downstairs, I asked Whip, why is it that you're a Republican? And Whip said to me, well, my father was a Republican, and his father was a Republican, and his father was a Republican, so therefore I'm a Republican. I said, Whip, that doesn't make any sense at all. And I outlined for him, as I have for you this evening, all the reasons why he should have been a Democrat. And said, Whip, let me put it this way. If your father had been an embezzler, and his father a bank robber, and his father a horse thief, and Whip said, well, then I would have been a Democrat. Whip has helped an awful lot of people, and he's helped this freshman representative. I represent 1/3 of Stoneham. He represents 2/3. He does 99.9% of the work and always makes sure that I get at least 50% of the credit. Nobody is going to miss Whip more in the State House than this representative. He's been very kind to me. He's been very kind to all of you. and I'm delighted that I was asked to say a few words tonight, and I wish him nothing but the best. You will be missed. You'll never be forgotten.
For those of us that have over the years, and it's really been 24 years in Winchester, and I believe in Stoneham it's been close to 10, Whip Saltmarsh has marched every year in the Memorial Day Parade. First in Winchester, and then in Stoneham. And as a guy who's marched with him for 21 years, there is no question that he is the worst marcher of anybody I have ever seen, not to mention the worst dresser. And I would like to have a blind auction for a piece of memorabilia on Whip's parade, and I have that package right behind here. I'd like someone to open the bidding. $10, $15, $20, $30. Sold to the gentleman in the back for $30. For those that don't know it, this is Bob Fiore from Winchester. The last time he parted with $30 was a long time ago. It says, have a good confirmation. This will go to my favorite charity. Why don't you open it up here? Here it is. This suit, try that on. I think this will be a pretty good buy. This suit, in 14 years, he wore this suit 8 times. And this suit, for those of you who know Whip's house, is always open. We went up last night and got this out of Whip's closet. And he used to wear this, and he always wore it with those brown and white Spectator pumps. You remember those? The label is Sano Cleaners. You got that in the bio. You can keep that.
Thank you very much.
Good. Wear it in good health. Wear it in good health. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was up in Whip's abandoned house last night looking for that suit in the middle of the night, I also thought, gee, wouldn't it be nice if we could find the shoes? And Whip, I have a special presentation from me to you. I couldn't believe it. I got up there in his closet, and these two mothers had shoe trees in them. You were going to wear them again? You're not going to wear them again? I drilled holes right through those babies. And I also had them mounted in the way you marched in that position. I love it.
But I guess it falls upon me as the Vice Chairman of the Transportation Committee to maybe convey the sentiments of the people that you served most closely with, the people in the Joint Committee on Transportation. I actually have a letter to read, but I think the best part of the letter is right here, and I was supposed to read the letter of the chairman, and within your programs you probably see a comment there. It says, Whip, for 14 years you have set a standard of public service which those of us you leave behind in the House can only dream of attaining. Your devotion to the people of Winchester and Stoneham is legendary and has been reflected in the overwhelming support they have given you in each election year. And those words were uttered by Steve Carroll, who is the chairman of the committee, and unfortunately he couldn't be with us tonight, and that is the reason why I'm here tonight, but I'm going to let you all in on a little secret. Steve Carroll might be the chairman in title, and I may be the vice chairman in title, but Whip Saltmarsh really is the chairman. Through an accident of party registration, he happens to be a Republican, and we can't allow a Republican to be chairman. But he is, indeed, but he has been the person who really runs that committee, and the person that we rely on a daily basis for insight, information, how to get the job done. I think it is unique in the legislature that it works in such a way. And I'm speaking the truth, and you can ask the other members of the Transportation Committee who are here tonight. I see Representative Bump and so many of the staff people who work with WHIP. I have the great pleasure of sharing an office with WHIP, and you really get to know somebody very special as a colleague, a friend, someone who advises you on a daily basis, somebody who you pay your insurance premiums to, and as somebody who just helped the people of my district. He's done an outstanding job of bringing home the bacon to the people in Winchester and Stoneham, but he's done that also to the people I represent in Dorchester and South Boston, and I know that goes for all of the other people in the room who serve with him. You are going to be sorely, sorely missed, Whip. And I can just say that someone who's leaving with you, you are going to be one of the most cherished memories that I have of serving in the House of Representatives. You're one of the finest people I've ever met in any walk of life, but especially in public life. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure over the years to serve on many committees which require solicitation of donations. And many times over the years I would approach Whip and I would ask him if he would be interested to make a donation to the Boy Scouts, or to St. Mary's Parents Association, or to the Chamber of Commerce, or the Rotary, or whatever, wherever there may be a raffle being conducted. And he would say, talk to Bobby Lee. And then Bobby Lee would say, well, what did he say? And I said, well, we're going to get together a basket of cheer. And he said that he'd like to make a donation. Well, the next thing I know, he would be, the basket of cheer would, the whole basket of cheer would come from Whip. So tonight, Whip, I'd like to present to you a basket of cheer. And I want you to know, he always did these things on a Thursday night.
Whip, for 14 years, I've been very fortunate to have worked with Whip and seen on many of his accomplishments, many you haven't seen over the years. When I think of Whip, I think of things like the Ginfield Bridge, Vista Valley Parkway, Palmer Lake Street, North Border Road, Hillcrest Parkway, Mystic Valley Parkway, we hope. The Winchester Center revitalization. I could go on and on, the salt sheds, the energy grants, and go on and on and on. And, but instead of going on, I'd like to present you with a little something to help you as you get older. Your memory starts to go, okay? So this will help you to remember all those wonderful projects you did for the town of Winchester.
Hey, Jake, you only put the good ones on here. I look here, you know, he didn't mention a couple of these things. Here's one here, a picture of the Woburn Loop. Great deal we got from the MBTA, Mr. O'Leary. Paid him 120 grand. The only thing we can put up on it is the world's largest bowling alley. And the town's been in controversy ever since. And we got the famous Swanton Street Bridge. You got a lot of nerve putting that one down, Jake. For those people in Stoneham that didn't know what happened to some of your taxpayers' money that went to Winchester, Whip arranged for us to get a replacement of the Swanton Street Bridge, a bridge that runs over the train tracks. 2 days after we get the grant and we award the contract for $3 million, to some family from New Hampshire. They shut the railroad down. And for 3 years, Bellino's business goes up because everybody has to stop and get pizza while they wait for the traffic. And he's got this one down here on the downtown, the Main Street Bridge replacement. $400,000 grant we've got. We've got $4,200 worth of barriers that have been down there a year and a half. I saw this presentation a couple of days ago, and I said, gee, if I was going to make a presentation that had a map on it of Winchester, I think there ought to be a different emphasis. And I made up my own. Let me get it. Let me read this, ladies and gentlemen. I got this from the Department of Internal Revenue. It's known as Exhibit A. I don't know what they're going to use it for. But it lists all the properties that Saltmarsh has owned with identifications in Winchester in the last 14 years. Let me read them off. 140 Mount Vernon Street, 144 Mount Vernon Street, 152 to 154 Mount Vernon Street, Highland Avenue, Stevens Street, Wesley Street, Myrtle Street, 158 to 160 Mount Vernon Street, the White Hen, the Saltmarsh Agency, Nelson Street, and lest we forget, the Bonnell Motor property. And if you add them up, it comes to exactly 14 parcels, one per year. And you wonder why he's getting out. And you can see, for those that don't know, you can see here there's a little note that says White Hen in Revere. He dumped that one after Reinstein got arrested. And then over here, White Hen in Lexington. A lot of Republicans didn't know that. They don't even allow white hens in Lexington. And then, unknown to a lot of people up in New Hampshire moving north, we have Lake Property number 1, Lake Property number 2, and Lake Property number 3. And a recent addition, the tennis courts. The tennis courts. You read the, I don't know if you read the Woburn Times tonight. They gave a medical history of this guy. Bad knees, bad arms, bad finger, bad teeth. Look at the space. And the guy's building tennis courts. Something's going on. And then in addition, they got this little note down here, to Florida. We haven't filled it out yet, but there's a parcel of land that's been obtained down in Florida, too. This is the map that ought to be published, baby. You'll see this again.
But I'm really pleased to be here because Whip truly has been a great friend of mine in the last 10 years that I've been in state government. In 1979, I was asked by Governor Ed King to become Undersecretary of Transportation, and that was quite a challenge at the time. And I went up and visited with Whip Saltmarsh, who I didn't really know too well, but I had heard so many good things about Whip and asked his advice, and Whip said, oh, sure, come on in, this is going to be great fun. So in 1979 and 1980, if you remember all those controversies about the MBTA, well, I was in the midst of most of them, in large part thanks to Whip. But then in 1980, when the governor was really having a difficult time, Whip calls me up and says, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't you be the new general manager of the MBTA? I said, Whip, geez, I don't think so. He said, yeah, you're the guy. I told Eddie King you're the guy. So I've been at the T ever since. But, things were tough enough. We were having all these fights with the advisory board in the cities and towns. So I went up to see Whip one day, and I said, Whip, and it's bad enough that I can't get any money out of the cities and towns. The legislature's got to be helpful, but now Ronald Reagan is going to cut all of the federal money. What am I going to do? Whip says, well, let me think about it, and I'll call you back. So a couple of days later, Whip calls me and says, Jim, I've got a great idea. He said, you know, I'm a Republican, and I have connections to the White House. And he said, if you and I can put a plan together, he says, I can guarantee you billions and billions of dollars for the MBTA. I said, that's great. What's the plan? Whip says, very simple. He says, you have to realize that Ronald Reagan's principal concern is national defense. We have to convince him that paying for the MBTA is in the national interest. I says, okay, how do we do that? He says, well, very simple. He says, we tell him we'll put MX missiles on the Red Line. I said, Whip, I'm not sure we can do that. He says, oh, absolutely. He says, Eddie King will love it. He says, Ronald Reagan will go for it. He says, you could have conductors give people autographed pictures of the president and thank them for their patriotism as they ride in the Red Line with nuclear-armed warheads. And just think of it, Jim. He says, you guys don't know where the hell the equipment is. How will the Russians ever find it? Well, I've been advancing that plan for 7 years, Whip, and we still don't have any money from Washington. But I'll tell you, I was the most surprised person in America when I read in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago, that the Russians have decided to put MX missiles on railroad cars. So obviously we were talking to the wrong people. But I want to make a presentation, if I could. There's a box over there, John. Be careful, it's heavy. It took 3 people from the T to put it in my car.
You can do it, John. You can do it. There we go.
There's another compensation claim coming. This is something that Whip's always wanted. It's an MBTA fare box. Unfortunately, Whip, when I asked them to put this together, I told them to leave the tokens in. But by the time I arrived here tonight, it's empty. So I guess you'll have to fill it up with some of your own coins. But on the box is inscribed to Whip Saltmarsh in recognition of 14 years of legislative support for the MBTA. As a member of the Committee on Transportation, the Massachusetts House of Representatives. In gratitude to all of us at the Take Whip, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Whip and I got to meet each other in about 1968. I was just out of high school. I was a high school coach, and I was an assistant coach. And I've been going to New Hampshire on vacation since 1955, so I love it up there. And we met up there, and we've been good friends ever since. He's just a great guy, and I've really enjoyed seeing him up there. The only thing is the guy, you can't relax around him. And I'm basically a fairly relaxed guy, and I go on vacation. I just want to read books and just sit back, and he's always working. He comes to the lake, he gets there Friday afternoon late, he works Saturday, and he works Sunday, gets in the car, shoots back home, and I go over to sit down and talk and just sit on the porch and smoke a cigar and just relax. This son of a gun is moving around. He's got grass. It's beautiful, but you're not allowed to walk on it. It's just so manicured that you're afraid to walk on the darn thing. So hopefully now that he's not as busy, maybe he'll be more busy for all I know, but at least he's not involved with all the things at the State House. Maybe the guy can relax and come up to the lake, and maybe I can teach him to fish. I know the guy didn't play tennis. Don't tell me you think you. I know he's not a tennis player. There's no way. But he's got a court, so that's important. But it's been fun for me to come into this area as a guy that just, as I said, as a high school coach, didn't know anybody, meet a guy early in those years that I was here, and then just have him become a good friend. And I appreciate his friendship. In my business, you're scrambling all the time, and you're recruiting, or you're trying to do things. You really don't meet and get close to that many people for whatever reasons. I don't know what all the reasons are, but you're very busy. But Sherman, I never call him Whip. I always call him Sherman. I'm the only guy in this room, I guess, that calls him Sherman. But Sherman and I have been good friends. He's helped me. I had clunkers of cars. I never had enough money this was in '68, to have a nice car. So he always had I'll never forget that. I won't tell that story. I won't tell it. There's a couple of stories I can't tell, but let's say he took care of some bad cars that I had, and it's really been fun. No, let me just say this. Somehow, some way, my windshield in my car was knocked out. And I won't say how it was knocked, but my windshield in my car, I had no windshield. It's now December 15th. Sherm comes up, puts on a wool hat down over his ears, starts this clunker of a car I had, and drove it from where? To Winchester? From Holliston to where? To BC. It had no windshield. The wind is blowing, and the guy's got the hat, and he's got the gloves. And it was my car with no windshield, and he drove it to BC. I said, what are you, crazy? But that's the kind of friend he is. So I appreciate his friendship, and I hope to see him more and more at the lake where we can relax. And it's been a lot of fun being here. I've never been around politicians. You guys are a lot of fun. I don't know if you... Maybe I ought to I know my business is a crazy business, but I tell you, it's not as crazy as what you guys have to go through. Thank you very much.
You heard Jack Bicknell, and we at school, we admire him, I guess, just as much as his players do. And he had maybe a bad year this year, but that doesn't faze Jack. He just is the nicest guy, the best guy to be around, whether he's good or bad, he's always the same. And I think that's why he's such a great coach and respected by so many people. When I received the invitation to come to the occasion tonight, I read the word toast on it, and I said, toast? I said, how in the hell can I say anything about a guy whose name is Sherman Whipple? We knew Whip when he was at BC, and I haven't seen that much of him, I guess, since I've been back to BC. I pay him my monthly payments on the insurance, I guess, or my wife does, and maybe this is why he has some of that property up in New Hampshire and the other places either. You don't have anything over in Warsaw, do you, Whip? You talk about transportation, and I, like Jack, don't know much about politics, and although I really enjoy watching the news and what have you, and when I heard about transportation, all I thought of was coming over from Boston College today. It took me an hour and 25 minutes to get from BC to here, and so maybe it's a good thing that Whip is retiring and getting out of the business. So. I didn't realize that Whip was such a fancy dresser. I knew his dad, and years ago when he used to wear the high collars and what have you, and I didn't know that Whip had the wardrobe that he has, and I guess maybe that's why at BC when he played hockey over there, we wondered why he wore his helmet backwards. When a week or so ago, I got a telephone call from one of the girls at Whip's office, and she asked me if I could bring along a shirt with a number 14 on it. And I thought back, and I looked at my scrapbooks to see if Whip wore number 14 when we played together, and I couldn't find these scrapbooks, Whip. They were too long ago, I guess. They're pretty well worn out. And so I said to the girl, why number 14? Well, I guess that tells you how much I know about politics. And I asked her why number 14, and she couldn't give me an answer. And she says, well, don't tell anybody, but for the last 14 years, this is the skimming that's been going on. 14, I thought at first maybe it was somebody was trying to be funny and said that was the number of goals that Whip got when he was at BC, the number of goals in the 3 years that he played in the varsity team. But I met Frank O'Grady on the way in today, and he says, hell, Len, he says, he never even got 14 assists while he was at BC. I don't have much else to say except that it's been a real pleasure for me to be here with the politicians and everybody. And I don't really know too much about this part of Massachusetts. I'm from Walpole, and we happened. I met the hockey coach here when on the way in, and we talked about the games that we played way back in the Bay State League. But I don't really know too much about this area, and it just has been nice for me to be asked here to come here. And I've known Whip for, I guess, 40-odd years, and I know as a hockey player, of course, many of you never saw him play. Probably half of you haven't seen him. But as a player, as I came into the auditorium tonight, somebody asked me what kind of a player Whip was, and I said he's a perfect duplicate of Terry O'Reilly. And I think you all know what Terry O'Reilly has done for the Bruins, what kind of a player he was, and he was just one hell of a worker, and he was the same way on the ice, and evidently the last 14 years, and since he's been out of BC, he's done the same thing. So it's a pleasure for me to have been here, and I was up in the attic last night. My wife found a shirt up there, and I'll be damned if it didn't have a number 14 on it. So.
Thank you, John. The voice is gone. I practiced the streets so much today. I lost my voice. Now I forgot the damn speech. Just a minute. I'm here tonight to represent the public works side of the municipal family. As you know, Whip is big in transportation. In addition to that, he took on many projects for the town of Stoneham, which made the town of Stoneham a much better place to live in. And tonight I'd like to give him some mementos of some of those bills which he pushed and weaned its way through the legislature, or got state public works to intervene on the town's behalf, and so on and so forth. There was one project where Route 128 was constructed, and the drainage that ran off 128 came down through the northwest section of the town and flooded out entire residential areas. We began in 1958, and we were working our way back up through the ranks in state public works and getting absolutely nowhere. As soon as we took one step forward, we slide back two. It was like stepping on that stuff that the cow leaves behind just as it gets go, you know. It's a terrible ordeal. As a result, we had Senator Brennan and we had Whip Saltmarsh. Whip interceded on our behalf, did his work. And as a result, the flooding problem related to Route 128 was alleviated. It was a marvelous, absolutely marvelous project to get rid of. And on the behalf of the town of Stoneham, and especially the Public Works Department, I'd like to present Whip tonight with a memento of that occasion. This is a piece of the original concrete pipe that was installed in the ground. A second project, which was reported in our local newspaper this week, today as a matter of fact, had to do with a water tower put on top of Bear Hill and a transmission pipe which runs outside this building and alleviated the deficiency pressure problems we had in the town of Stoneham. We had some plugged pipes and we had some other problems in transmission, and they were alleviated. That again was a bill that was a combination of Jack Brennan and Whip Saltmarsh, and Whip was the guy that pushed that thing like crazy and got it done. And if you can imagine, the emphasis began in 1979, and here we are in 1988, and we're saying, thank God it's finally completed. On behalf of the town, again, Whip, I'd like to present you with this little memento of that, which is one of the pipes we took out of the ground. The last thing I'd like to do, I'd like to put another hat on. I'm the vice president of the Massachusetts Highway Association, and we are involved with highways. And it's people like Lou Nicanello and my good old friend Angie Murata over there, who worked on the Transportation Committee and got money passed back to the cities and towns under what we call Chapter 90 and other types of chapters similar to that, which make the roadways in communities like Winchester and Stoneham and all over the state much better off for it. I don't think Whip has received the proper accolades in the past for the amount of work he's done. When you consider the Chapter 90 funding alone, under his direction as a senior member of the Transportation Committee has gone from $20 million to $40 million to $60 million to $80 million. It makes an awful big difference in the field of public works. And to that end, I would like to present him a memento of the highway field relative to that money. It's a piece of hot top that come off Main Street. And we heard about his demise at his house. The only seats in the bathroom. And I guess that's crack too. So on behalf of the Massachusetts Highway Association, we'd like to present him with a chair from his alma mater, BC. Congratulations. It's heavy.
My colleagues at Boston College, Coach McNell and Coach Zaglaxis, I work at BC too to supplement the rather inadequate income you people pay your public servants in Massachusetts. By the way, Lenny, I'm sure Jack was delighted that you told everybody what a great guy he is despite the lousy year that he had. The last time I checked, the hockey team wasn't undefeated, was it, Whip? Jesus. Speaking of BC, Whip will enjoy this. This is an article from the Sun Tribune in Baltimore, quoting Tony Ambridge, the 2nd District Baltimore City Councilman, standing amid the wreckage of the Michael Dukakis presidential campaign on election night and attempting to put words around what went wrong, said, "Too much Harvard and not enough Boston College." Before I begin my remarks, how about a nice round of applause for our Master of Ceremony tonight, John Sullivan? Huh? Is he doing a great job? The obvious task of a Master of Ceremonies is to be so incredibly dull and boring that all the speakers appear brilliant by comparison. John, you've done a great job tonight so far. Whip was very worried about tonight's dinner, and he kept calling John and saying, "How are the ticket returns coming? Are people going to show up? I don't want them buying. I want a full house. I'm getting nervous." So they finally went out to dinner one night last week to one of those trendy new restaurants in Boston, the Back Bay, with the ferns and the mirrors all around the wall. And they had dinner and a bottle of wine, and they're talking about tonight's affair and the planning for it. And after dinner, they had a second bottle of wine. And then they had a third bottle of wine. And by that time, the lights came up. It was time to go home. And forgetting about the mirrors, John looked across the room and he said, "Whip, you won't believe this, but there's a guy sitting over there who looks exactly like you." So Whip looked over. He said, "John, this is unbelievable. The guy with him looks exactly like you." So John stood up. He said, "Come on, let's go buy them a drink." And Whip said, "Sit down. I think they're coming over." You know, there are a couple of traditions on Beacon Hill when people are serving their last term. One is that the night of prorogation, you address your colleagues in the House. And the other is that the morning after prorogation, you hold your last press conference on Beacon Hill. So Whip held his last press conference last week. And after the usual questions as to his reactions to leaving and his emotions at the time, Whip said, "Are there any other questions?" And they said, "Well, no, I think that's about wraps it up, Representative." He said, "Look, this is my last press conference. You can ask me any questions you want about absolutely anything. I'd be delighted to answer them." So one of the wags in the Beacon Hill press said, "Well, okay. How many seconds in a year?" Whip said 12. January 2nd, February 2nd, March 2nd. Second guy said, "How many days of the week start with the letter T?" Whip said 2. Third guy said, "What are they?" Whip said, "Today and tomorrow." Then a guy from the Boston Herald. These are the really sharp reporters in Beacon. You all know the Herald. It's the Globe without verbs. The guy from the Boston Herald, he said, "Whip, how many D's are there in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer?" And Whip said 317 without even stopping to think. He said, "I've got you. There are only 4. Whip said, "I've got you. There are 317. Listen up and count them. Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee." You can applaud if you want. Please yourselves. One day last August, a Monday morning in the State House parking lot, I ran into Whip and his left eye was black. I said, "Whip, what happened?"
He said, Charlie, you won't believe it. I was at Mass yesterday at St. Mary's. It was hot as blazes. We stood up for the gospel. A woman standing in front of me, her dress was tucked up and back. I thought, God, that must be uncomfortable, so I reached forward and pulled it out. She turned around and belted me. I said, well, that will teach you to mind your own business. The following Monday morning, coincidentally enough, I see him again in the State House parking lot. The right eye is black. I said, Whip, this is getting ridiculous. What happened now? He said, Charlie, you absolutely won't believe this. I was in the same church yesterday, St. Mary's, the same Mass, hot as blazes again. The same woman was in the pew in front of me. We stood up for gospel. The dress was tucked up and back again. I said, you don't mean to tell me? He said, honest to God, I didn't, Charlie. The guy standing next to me did. But I remembered from last week that she didn't like that, so I reached forward and tucked it back up there again.
There is no magic pill to keep you from getting cancer. But there...
One day last August, a Monday morning, in the State House parking lot, I ran into Whip, and his left eye was black. I said, Whip, what happened? He said, Charlie, you won't believe it. I was at Mass yesterday at St. Mary's. It was hot as blazes. We stood up for the gospel. A woman standing in front of me, her dress was tucked up and back. I thought, God, that must be uncomfortable, so I reached forward and pulled it out. She turned around and belted me. I said, well, that will teach you to mind your own business. The following Monday morning, coincidentally enough, I see him again in the State House parking lot. The right eye is black. I said, Whip, this is getting ridiculous. What happened now? He said, Charlie, you absolutely won't believe this. I was in the same church yesterday, St. Mary's, the same Mass, hot as blazes again. The same woman was in the pew in front of me. We stood up for gospel. The dress was tucked up and back again. I said, you don't mean to tell me? He said, honest to God, I didn't, Charlie. The guy standing next to me did. But I remembered from last week that she didn't like that, so I reached forward and tucked it back up there again. You know, out at BC, we call Coach Bicknell Cowboy Jack. He loves horses, has one himself, loves to ride. Last spring, Whip called me, said, I got a great deal. I know a guy who has a stud who just sired 2 beautiful horses, and he wants to sell them both. They rode down, took a look at them, and they each bought one. They put them in a barn, and Jack said to Whip, look, just so we'll be able to tell them apart, I'm going to cut the left ear off of my horse. And he did. That night, the 2 horses fought in the barn, and Whip's horse had his left ear ripped off by Jack's horse. They go down in the morning, there's the 2 horses without their left ears. So Whip says, I'll tell you what, I'll take the tail off of my horse. That night, the horses fight in the barn again. Whip's horse rips the tail off of Jack's horse. They go back the next morning. There's the 2 horses without the left ears, without the tails. Whip says to Jack, look, this is stupid. Why don't you just take the white one and I'll take the black one? The last time I was out this way was last spring. Whip asked me to come out and speak at the Holy Name Society Communion Breakfast at St. Pat's in Stoneham. And Father Hannon said the Mass. He was in great form that day. All fire and brimstone. He really gave us the business. He said, stand up. All those who want to be saved and go to heaven. Of course, we all stood up. He said, now sit down. And we sat down. He said, now stand up, all those who want to be damned to everlasting hell. And of course, nobody stood in the entire church, except for Whip. There he stood all by himself, halfway down the middle aisle. The Father glared down at him from the podium. He said, Whip Saltmarsh, do you mean to tell me that you want to be damned to everlasting hell? And Whip said, no, Father, but I hated to see you standing there all by yourself. And you know, in the final analysis, That's why we're all here tonight, because Whip Saltmarsh has never left any one of us standing there all by himself or herself. She's got the right idea. Follow her cue. No one in this room could ever ask for a finer friend. And for me, it's been interesting to see that the private man that I've known these many years and the public man that I've observed have been exactly the same. There's been no difference between them. Here has been a resolute, cheerful leader with firm ideals and conviction, a man of courage and compassion, of determination and dedication, of energy, of wit, of intelligence, of integrity, a person always striving to excel and to improve the lot of others. He has served the people of Winchester and Stoneham, and indeed all the people of Massachusetts, with unquestioned integrity, with absolute impartiality, and with complete devotion to the public interest. And Whip, I guess the consolation for all of us in this room tonight is that while these good people will no longer have you as their state representative, and I will no longer have you as a colleague, we all will continue to enjoy your beautiful friendship for many years to come. It's a delight to be with you all tonight as you honor a truly great guy. You've been the greatest Thursday night audience I've had all week. Put your hands together for yourselves.
What the hell's going on here?
Move over, John. Move over. John, I gotta get my guys with. Come on, guys. Let's go. All right. Ready, go. Give me an S. S. Everybody.
Everybody.
Give me an S. A. Give me an L.
L.
Give me a T.
T.
Give me an M.
M.
Give me an A.
A.
Woo. Give me an R.
That's me.
Give me an S. Give me an H. What do you got? Saltmarsh! For Saltmarsh! For Saltmarsh! We're here to celebrate! For Saltmarsh! For Saltmarsh! Ain't that just great? For he's the man that really can do it! Do it! Really, really do it! For Stoneham! For Winchester! Here! He did it! He really, really did it! All right, everybody! For Saltmarsh! For Saltmarsh! We are here tonight! For Saltmarsh! For Saltmarsh! We cheer with all our might! His motto was, for all these years, he did it! To do it! To really, really do it! And now's the time to say thank you to Whip from all his friends! We wish you luck because you did it! You did it! You really, really did it! Yay!
I don't think I can tell you how warm a feeling it is for me to come into a room like this and look out at your faces and realize that more than 8 out of 10 of you voted against my pay raise. Well, up yours. You better retire after this, Whip. I got a lot to say. By the way, I know you don't have the class to do it, so could I introduce Paul Casey? He must be here somewhere. Hi, Paul. There'll be a vote for Speaker January 4th, Paul. Remember who had the guts to introduce you here. You know, I recently went, and this is a true story, give me an A, give me a B, give me a break. When Governor Dukakis was campaigning for president, I was asked by him to tour the Midwest, and I did, and I toured California, too, on 2 campaign trips. And it was really very interesting to go on his plane. And the first night we were in Chicago, and this is an absolute true story, and I thought you might be interested because the kind of common dull lives you lead, you probably wouldn't have this kind of experience that I... State Senator Paul White, nice to see you. Watch out, Angie Marauder is behind you. Keep your hand on the wall. And this is an absolute true story. The first night we stayed in a Chicago hotel, and when I woke up the next morning, there was a note under my door, and this is the way they would tell the people in the entourage what to do. And there was a note under my door saying, would you appear with the governor at a breakfast at 8 o'clock? He's going to be speaking to some fundraisers, and at 8 o'clock I did. I was sitting in the back of a room like this, and there were 100 people there, half of them Greek. I don't know why it was funny, but we laughed too that day, if I remember. And these were potential fundraisers, and the governor was speaking to them, and he used a theme. I don't know if any of you ever heard it. It was about his immigrant parents. Oh, you heard it? Did you get as sick of it as I did? I mean, so he told the story, and many of them had the handkerchief out wiping the tear from their eye. It was really touching. And then he said, I have with me the Speaker of the Massachusetts House. He's in the rear of this room, and he too is the son of immigrant parents. His parents came from Turkey, and that's true. It was never funny to us, madam. We still hate those bastards. Are there any Armenians here, by the way? Hey, each bestes. Yeah. Eşege asi, kides. We called him an asshole. Gotta be ashamed of yourself. So he said, I'd like him to come up here and say a few words too, so I did. This was the last time he asked me to speak on this trip. I said, my father came to this country in 1911. He was a bachelor, he was in his early 20s, came alone. This is true. And all he had, the whole world, was the suit of clothes he was wearing and $500,000 in cash. And ladies and gentlemen, he made it. Isn't this a wonderful country? Governor Dukakis, the world's leading example of a successful charisma bypass. Recently, I was speaking at the Park Plaza Hotel. There were 2,000 state employees. It was called the Manny Carbello Awards Dinner. And I said to them, with the governor sitting next to me, I said, I have never seen so many state employees in one room. I always expected to see this number, but it was going to be in a field. And then I explained that every time I call a state agency, they tell me he's in the field today. And I assumed someday I would walk into a field with thousands of state employees. And I then said to the governor, who has a great sense of humor, I said, Governor, you know, you have a problem. You want to depress the central artery. You don't know where you're going to get the money. I think I have a solution for you if you'd listen. He said, what is it? I said, why don't you talk to it? I said, if you talk to the central artery the way you talk to the members of the Massachusetts House, slowly it will depress itself. And when I said that, somebody in the audience yelled, and he can bore the Third Harbor Tunnel at the same time. Yeah. Whip is not a guy who ducks questions. I asked him one time if he had any opinion about sex on TV. He said, I generally favor it, but you got to be extremely careful of the antenna.
What do you mean you're embarrassed and you want to get out of here? If you think that one embarrassed you, how about the lady who went to the doctor and said, I've never used this one before and I've been advised not to, but I'm going to try it out here, and if it works, I'll do it in Everett. Tried to find this place all night. I got lost. Round and round Stoneham. I said, this is a friendly town. Mario Ciroli, he still owns this joint? Yes. Still in the rackets? So I said, I saw a guy walking by the side of the road. Whip is laughing because Mario is. He says, he doesn't even know what he said, but he said it. So there's a guy walking down the street, Stoneham being a friendly place. I stopped the car, opened the window. I said, hey, Jack, you know how to get to the Montvale Plaza? He said, how'd you know my name was Jack? I said, I guessed. He said, then guess how to get to the Montvale Plaza. But I found it. By the way, what should I tell you now? Should I just tell you one or two things about Whip? When I did get here, by the way, I couldn't park. It's crowded out there. Went round and round and round. Finally, I don't know who this guy is, an old guy came out. He said, I'll take the car. I said, excuse me, sir, how old are you? He said, 94. I said, you work here? He said, yeah. You're 94 years old and you work here? He said, yeah. He said, you mind if I ask you a personal question? He said, no. He said, it's going to sound funny. He said, go ahead. Do you go regular? He said, what? I said, I knew it would sound funny. Your bodily functions, do you go regular? He says, yep, every morning like clockwork, 6 o'clock. I said, that's great. He said, not so great, don't get up till 8. Did Whip tell you the time he went to Northern Ireland to get away from the same kind of pressure that, oh God, my secretary's here. Maureen Hegarty, would you stand for a bow? She's my dear secretary. Maureen, please stand. Stand, just, thank you. Tomorrow, let me tell you what I'm going to have to put up with. Because Maureen is the mother of the world and the most Catholic person you ever knew. Mr. Speaker, you don't have to swear to be popular. You could have made them laugh and been decent. After all, you could go places if you could just clean up your act. Right, Maureen? Now you won't have to tell me tomorrow. Well, Whip went to Northern Ireland to get away from everything, and there he was in Northern Ireland in a room about 12 o'clock at night. Things were hot and muggy. He said, I think I'll go out and take a walk. So he's on the streets of Northern Ireland, walking by an alley, and out jumps a gunman, puts a .45 automatic in his stomach, says, put your hands up, and he did. The guy says, are you Catholic or Protestant? Whip says, I'm not getting involved in this. He says, I'm an Arab. The gunman says, I must be the luckiest Jew in Belfast. And two little stories I think you'd want to know. What did Whip do right after high school? How many of you knew him then? Isn't that impressive? Well, Whip went to Saudi Arabia. That's right out of high school, 18 years old. Little trip. His father and mother sent him there. And while he was there, he went into a Saudi Arabian variety store and he stole a Twinkie. And he got caught. He got caught. And they brought him before the Saudi Arabian prince. And you know, it may sound funny to you, but the penalty for theft over there is much more serious than it is here. It was death. But the Saudi Arabian prince said, look, let's give him a break. He's young, he's a tourist, he's a stranger, he's just out of high school. He didn't know. Let's give him 3 challenges, and if he accepts them and succeeds, we'll let him go. So they said, these are the 3 challenges. Whip, you have to drink 20 bottles of wine within 30 minutes. You have to remove an impacted wisdom tooth from the mouth of a fierce Bengal tiger. And you have to make wild, passionate love to a beautiful Arabian princess. You think you can do that? He said, I'll give it a try. So they put him in the first tent with the wine. And minute after minute ticked away, and empty bottle after empty bottle was thrown outside the flap. At the end of 30 minutes, there were 20 empty bottles of wine. And Whip Saltmarsh staggered out. His eyes blurry, his clothes disheveled. Where's the tent with the tiger? And they put him in the second tent with the tiger. And ladies and gentlemen, the noise was unbelievable. The moans, the groans, the shaking of the tent, sand being spewed up everywhere. And finally, out staggered Whip Saltmarsh, this time still blurry-eyed, clothes still disheveled, scratched and bloody and torn. He said, "Where's the beautiful Arabian princess with the impacted wisdom tooth?" You got to explain that one sometimes. Where you kids got a lot of questions, huh? And the final thing that I knew of Whip Saltmarsh before he became a legislator, and I just found this out recently, what did he do before he was a legislator? Before he was an insurance agent. He worked for the mafia. Yeah, one day the Godfather called Whip in, said to him, "Look, you're my lieutenant. We need somebody to keep the books. Somebody who'll keep his mouth shut and forget what he sees and hears." He says, "Godfather, I think I got somebody. It's my brother-in-law. He's deaf and dumb, and he's a certified public accountant." He said, "Bring him in." And he did. And he worked 3 months. Godfather called Whip in. He says, "You know, we just had Joe DiNucci do an independent audit of our books." Joe works on the side ever since you took his pay away. He tells me that he's into us for $300,000. Get him in here. So the next day, there was the Godfather, there was his lieutenant, Whip, and there was the deaf and dumb CPA brother-in-law. The Godfather said, "Ask him where the money is." Whip said, "The Godfather wants to know where the $300,000 is." The deaf and dumb CPA brother-in-law said, "Tell the Godfather, I don't know what he's talking about." Godfather said, "What did he say?" "Godfather, he doesn't know what you're talking about." Godfather took out a .38 revolver. Said, "Tell him if he doesn't tell me where the money is, I'm going to put a bullet between his eyes." Whip says, "The Godfather says, if you don't tell him where the $300,000 is, he's going to put a bullet between your eyes." The deaf and dumb CPA brother-in-law says, "Oh, God, tell him the money is in a metal box buried at the bottom of my cellar stairs." The Godfather said, "What did he say?" Whip says, "Godfather, he says you don't have the guts to shoot him." And, well, enough of that. In the minute or two that I have left, and I hope nobody was offended, were you? No. Let me say that Whip Saltmarsh is one of the closest friends that I have, not only in the State House, but in the world. It was only Whip, as a Republican, Paul, who could get me here 2 years ago, so that the Stoneham and Winchester Democratic City Committees could write to the governor asking for my resignation for having endorsed Whip Saltmarsh. And of course, Charlie Flaherty kept out of it by being here himself. And Jim Brett, is Jim here tonight, by the way? You and he don't get along anymore? Oh yeah, ever since redistricting. Yeah. But for many years, Whip has been a friend of mine, and my late mother's. My mother suffered a great deal in the last 7 or 8 years of her life. She passed away in 1982. But, and I'm a lifelong bachelor, and I was taking care of her. And there wasn't a Sunday at Mass General Hospital, and she was there for many years, or in my home, that Whip didn't come by himself with flowers. I never knew if you bought them, Whip. I know you have a friend that's a florist in Winchester, and I figured if you're doing in Winchester what I'm doing in Everett, you didn't buy them. But the thought was there, and he would spend 2 hours, 3 hours with me, and my mother loved him, and I love him. He really is a good friend. Forget, you know, all this about the great legislator, because he is. You know that. You wouldn't be here if you didn't love him like I do. And I'm so sad that he's leaving, but so happy that he's going to have a great life, and I'm going to have a great friend for the rest of my life. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's come that time of the evening when we have to listen to him, I guess. I'd just like to say a few words and present a gift to WIP on behalf of everybody here. I've known WIP for a long time, and I think we've heard a lot about WIP this evening, his public service and his friendship, and all of the things that I think everybody knew before they walked in here. But I think George Kaverian just touched on something that is not really very well known. And that's another side of WIP Saltmarsh that is unheralded. And it may have crossed your mind that WIP visiting the late Mrs. Kaverian was an unusual event, and that is not true. WIP Saltmarsh really has devoted a lot of his life to caring about people that most of you people don't even know here. Some young people who are in trouble, who he has sat with for hours, parents who are troubled over their youth, with sick people, both old and young, recovering and dying, and people that just need to talk to somebody. And there aren't many people like that you run across in life, and I think that if there's one reason that I'm real proud to be here, that whether you're big or small, WIP has always got an ear to help you out, and doesn't ask for anything in return, and doesn't really want anyone to know about it. And I think it's those unwritten things that most of the people here really know about in their heart. He's done an awful lot of things for an awful lot of people in a very short period of time. And I think that if anybody who has had the opportunity to know WIP will have had their life changed at least a little bit. And so it's with a great deal of pleasure, WIP, that I would like to present to you a gift on behalf of all the folks here, and something hopefully to go with your paintings, in your chairs, in your sweater, in your houses. And while he's opening that, I have another presentation. In putting this together, it became obvious to those of us, Jerry Polcari, Connie Pappas, Kathy Alexander, and others who have worked on this, that there is one person and someone up here at the head table that deserves as much credit tonight as probably WIP, and that's Bobby Lee. And we've got a little gift for Bobby.
Almost, George. You want to go?
Did you eat, George? Ladies and gentlemen, the man of the hour, WIP Saltmarsh.
I've had the opportunity to attend many functions and different affairs with my colleagues from the House of Representatives, but this is the first time that I've had the opportunity to be honored by such a group of people. I know particularly I was pleased tonight to have Jack McNeil and Len Siglaski to come from BC. Len mentioned about Jack having a year which maybe wasn't as good as some of the other years. But I can remember I think most of you can remember that just several years ago that BC went down to the Cotton Bowl and beat the University of Houston. It was traditional that when a dignitary came to visit in Africa, that he or she would be honored by this group of Africans. In this particular area, there was a large tribe of Africans and headed by a tribal head. And Jack had concluded his month of coaching these people in Africa. And the head of the tribe brought Jack up onto this sort of a hill. And there were thousands of Africans right out in front. They had a ceremony to honor Jack before he came back to Boston. Down below this field, there was sort of a pen area where they kept a number of prize bulls. So Jack was brought up by this tribal chief, and the chief said, "We want to thank you very much, Jack, for the great job you've done for the people in this part of Africa. Take time out of a busy schedule. We're really happy." And with that, the whole tribe just yelled out, "Ungawa! Ungawa!" And Jack was really elated. He said, "You know," to the tribe, he said, "if I could have stayed here one more month, I would have had a team as good as any high school team in the United States." Well, with that again, the whole tribe yelled out, "Ungawa! Ungawa!" And boy, Jack was really elated. He said, "You know, if I could have stayed here 2 months more, I would have had a team as good as any college team in the United States." And with that, the place went wild. And they all yelled and screamed, "Ungawa! Ungawa!" Jack was so elated, it was almost as great as winning the Cotton Bowl with Doug Flutie. And he said, "You know, if I could have stayed here 3 months, I would have had a team that could have beaten any pro team in the United States." Well, with that, the whole place went wild. And everybody just cheered and yelled, "Ungawa! Ungawa!" Finally, things quieted down. And the tribal chief said to Jack, he said, "Now, it's your time, Jack, to go down and pick out any one of those prize bulls down in that pen and take it back home to America. But Jack, when you go down to that bullpen, make sure that you don't step in the Ungawa." You know what? I want to thank Charlie Flaherty for, thanks, John. He turned the clock around, so we've got another hour. Charlie Flaherty mentioned about Paul Casey being here and being elected to be my successor. On election night, I took the opportunity to go down and visit Paul at the Sons of Italy and congratulate him on winning the election. At the time, I had my finger in a cast. Most of you know that I had an unfortunate accident where I had severed the end of the finger. And it was mentioned by Paul Casey that I had severed that finger by moving something, a washing machine. And someone said to Paul, why didn't he hire Casey and Hayes to move the washing machine? And he said, well, we couldn't get any prepayment out of them. Anyway, I think tonight's a good opportunity, Paul, to really tell the truth why I didn't hire Casey and Hayes. Charlie Flaherty and I, some of my other colleagues, George Kavarian, went on a junket, a fact-finding trip in San Diego a number of years ago. Some of you remember that there was a noise pollution problem at Logan Airport, and we went for an extended period of time to San Diego to investigate the monitoring devices at the San Diego International Airport. We get on the plane to come home from San Diego to Boston. And we get on a 707, a 4-engine jet. We got in, sat down on the plane, and who wasn't in front of me but Paul's parents, Bill and Ann Marie Casey. I was sitting with the speaker. We sat down on the plane and we took off from San Diego. The captain came on. He said, "This is the captain speaking." He said, "We're going to arrive in Boston in approximately 4 hours." He gave us the altitude, the wind speed, and so forth. About 20 minutes later, the captain came on. He said, "This is the captain speaking. We've lost the power on the outside right engine. So we're going to arrive in Boston about a half an hour later than the estimated time of arrival." At that point, Bill Casey leaned over at his wife and about a jibber-jabber and said something. We couldn't quite hear it. Then about a half an hour later, the captain came on again. He said, "We've lost power on the outside engine on the left side of the plane. So we're going to arrive in Boston 1 hour later." At that point, Paul's mother and dad talked back and forth. And again, about a half an hour later, the captain came on. He said, "We've just lost the power on the inside engine on the right side." Of course, now we've lost 3 engines out of the 4. So he said, "We're going to arrive in Boston about 2 hours later." So Bill Casey, the head of Casey and Hayes Moving Company, leaned over to his wife and said to Anne Marie, he said, "You know, if we lose the power on the 4th engine, we're going to be up here all night." That's why I didn't have Casey and Hayes move my washing machine. John said he's got to get his suit back. Incidentally, John has got a new job. He shakes his head. We've heard the comments tonight about that Tim O'Leary made about the difference between Republicans and Democrats. This guy calls himself a Democrat, but he's really Republican. You are looking at the highest paid garbage and trash man in America. If you look at his career, he was president of Charles T. Maine, primarily to clean up nuclear waste in the power plants in the United States, at a huge salary, higher than anybody in this room, you know, and he probably went down and voted against everybody's pay raise. Then he moved over to Signal Environmental Systems, and the poor people in Stoneham who have their rubbish taken to Resco Incorporated in Saugus and some other communities, a company which he was president of. Now the people of Stoneham are stuck with some of the highest tipping fees in the Northeast. John left that company. He left the town of Stoneham with a huge debt, and now he's the president of a new company called Pearland. You probably don't know what that means. It's one of these startup companies. You know, you read about them in Fortune magazine and Business Week, those Republican magazines. The PER stands for Perini. Oh, no. The PER stands for Perini, and the land is for Ashland Oil. Now his salary is almost up to, well, I won't mention it because it's more than the combined salary of most everybody in this room. He is now in the business of cleaning up hazardous waste sites in the United States. And he, as I said earlier, you are now seeing tonight the highest paid trash executive in North America. Even his nieces and nephew are clapping now. They think they're going to get a big Christmas present. I never got a dime out of him, honey, for years and years. Talk about a guy being so cheap. There's his mother sitting out there tonight, Madeline Sullivan. I'm glad you clapped, because you won't clap after you hear this story.
Everybody's heard it.
You think they've heard it. John is one of 7 children. 6 have left the nest. 1 stayed, John Sullivan. Thank God, she said. Thank the Massachusetts legislature, Madeline. John stayed home with his mother in Canterbury Road in Winchester. Beautiful home, suburban community, tree-lined street, a valuable piece of property. Madeline Sullivan had the property in her name. This is a true story. There's somebody out there who hasn't heard it. Maybe they work in the registry of deeds. What happened? John said to his mother, look, Mom, you know, just you and I here now. All the other family's gone, sisters and brothers. You're getting along in years, and you know, I'm doing okay in business. Why don't you transfer the house over to me? Just deed it over, Mom. I'll fix it up. I'll paint it. I'll put in a new heating system. I'll take care of it. I'll have the lawn manicured. You won't have a worry in the world, Mom. So Madeline thought, gee, this is a great son to do this. The last one of the family staying home. I'm here alone. So she deeded that house over to her son. He didn't, you know what the lie is? He stole it. Anyway, the property was deeded over. And they agreed that, he agreed, I won't say who they are, to charge Madeline a nominal rent. Well, you know what nominal rents are in the town of Winchester. And you know, I have been a Republican. You want to get up and speak? She said she goes out to dinner 3 days a week. That's the 3 days he turns the heat down. Anyway, John says we're getting a bit late, so we'll cut it short. I don't want to get into the bad part of the deal. Anyway, I'd just like to say in closing that I want to thank both the boards of selectmen in Winchester that I've worked with through many years. I want to thank particularly the Speaker and Charlie Flaherty and my colleagues in the House for the support that I've had during the 14 years. George made reference to the fact that 2 years ago he came here as the Speaker of the House and Charlie as the Majority Leader when I had a tough campaign against Paul Casey. And let me just say to you that I happen to come from a town which has been thought of as being a Republican stronghold. We have approximately 13,000 registered voters. There are only 2,400 Republicans in the town. And there's absolutely no way that a Republican can be elected by just getting the Republican votes. And through the efforts of many Democrats, independents, and particularly was mentioned tonight by Mike Raleigh, the entire Board of Selectmen in Stoneham, John Sullivan, the Speaker, Charlie Flaherty, and many others, and particularly my dear friend sitting right here tonight, May Sirica. She sometimes refers to herself to me as my second mother. May, the chairman of the Democratic Town Committee for 25 years in Winchester, one of the founding members. She came out publicly and endorsed me in the newspapers. In May, I'll never forget that. And I want to thank you again for what you did for me on that last election in particular. You hear criticism many times about the way the press treats people in public office. And I can say tonight I'd like to thank the press, the Winchester Star, Karen Buckley, who was the new editor, but the Star over the years has been very fair to me. The Stoneham Independent, Frank Burns, with its editor, which is now part of the Woburn Times. I think, Frank, you can correct me on this. I think I'm the only person in 50 years or longer that was ever endorsed by that paper for the office of state representative. And I want to thank you personally for what you did in that endorsement. And to the Woburn Times, Dan Kennedy and Chris Conley, I have probably had more to do when it comes to the press with Dan and Chris than any other newspaper. And I honestly can say during my career that they never misquoted me. They were very fair. They would call me about different things, issues, whatever the case may be. And during that entire period, I can honestly say that I was never misquoted at any time by Dan and particularly Chris Conley, whom I think I've had the longest relationship. And I want to thank you for that, because I think the press many times is criticized, maybe not reporting. I know Jack is in the firing line many times, and Lenny, Jim O'Leary, my colleagues in legislature. I think that the three papers that I mentioned have been very fair to me. I think when people talk about the press maybe being not fair, I honestly can say in the case of those three papers, they were the exceptions if that's the case. They were very fair to me during my entire career. I'd like to thank Filippo Fadaroli and his wife Anna. As you know, as mentioned, they're the owners of Lucia's Restaurant in Winchester. Filippo came to this country, I think, 16 or 17 years ago from Italy. And George talked about someone in his family, namely his father, coming here with just a suit on, but with $500,000 in it. Filippo came without a suit and without any money. And today, he has got one of the finest restaurants, one of the finest Italian restaurants in the Northeast. He and his wife came to Winchester 3 or 4 years ago after we started the downtown revitalization. And I would just like to thank them tonight with this beautiful painting that they presented me. I think that two people who have worked so hard in a business, and to me it's a landmark now, to present me with that. That's one of the nicest things I've received tonight. To Jim O'Leary, he mentioned about my suggesting that he take the job at the T. He took the job. That was when Ed King was the governor. Ed King lost. Mike Dukakis became governor for the second term. Jim was under a contract which is running out. I believe it was in April of this particular year. And I asked him about it, and he said, well, I don't know if I'm going to be reappointed, but I hope I am. So I wrote a letter to Governor Dukakis. Actually, I think the letter was written by Lee Rogers, like about 99% of the letters. This letter was composed, written, and hand-delivered. I delivered to the governor on a Friday afternoon. I got a call the next morning, Saturday morning at home by Governor Dukakis. And he said, I read your letter, Whip. I'm impressed. Is everything you say about O'Leary really what he is? And I said, yes, Governor. Everything I wrote in that letter is exactly the way it is, and I would suggest that you reappoint him. Jim O'Leary was reappointed as head of the MBTA. And let me just tell you tonight, everybody in this room, there isn't a finer head of a rapid transit agency or a transportation agency in the United States than that man at the end of this table. Jim, it's been a pleasure to work with you all these years. I've been on the advisory board since 1964 and seen every single general manager of the MBTA, and he has been the best. I'd like to thank Mike Raleigh from Stoneham for presenting me that gift tonight, Mike. Bob Deering from the Winchester Board of Selectmen. Sal Porras representing Ed Mackey. Ed and I served in the House together. And he and I have had a strong relationship between our offices over the entire time that he's been Congressman representing us. Richie Rouse, one thing he didn't tell you, John introduced him as the clerk of the Supreme Court. We just got through a redistricting plan a short time ago. I say we. The Speaker was kind enough to appoint me to this committee. I'd been on it 10 years ago, and I think I was the only one he put on this time who had been on previously. And one of the things we had to do when it came to redistricting was to come up with a redistricting plan which we felt was the most equitable way to redistrict the legislative districts throughout the state. You know there's been a shift of population towards the South Shore, to Plymouth and the Cape. We came up with a plan which we thought was quite fair. The Black Political Caucus and the Republican State Committee brought suit in federal district court. And the plan we came up with was thrown out by the court. And the legislature and the redistricting committee particularly was asked to redraw these lines. And probably one of the toughest jobs that the Speaker had to do, and Charlie Flaherty and members of the committee, was to redraw this plan so it would be acceptable to the court. And in so doing, a legislative seat was lost in Dorchester. And the seat that was lost was Richie Rouse's. He took it. He didn't complain about it. And fortunately, there was an opening in the Supreme Court clerk's post, which is an elective post for 6 years. He ran and he won. Richie, I want to thank you for what you've done in working with me on the committee and just being a colleague, sharing an office. The way you conducted yourself during that redistricting, the hardest thing in the world is to have a legislator have his district just eliminated. We had no choice. The courts made us do it. It was done. It was accepted by the court. But you certainly conducted yourself in an exemplary manner. And I'm proud of you, and I think everybody in the legislature was, what you did. I want to thank Anna Mae Arsenault, Karen Ward. I've had a great deal of dealings with the respective town clerks. I came over to Stoneham in 1978 as a result of the house cut. One of the first people I met in Stoneham was Anna Mae. And I can just say to you that during that 10-year period, we had a lot of dealings, a lot of things we dealt with back and forth in her office, and she certainly conducted herself in the highest professional manner. Anna Mae and Karen, if she's still here, I want to thank you both for what you've done as town clerks. I want to thank Jack Bicknell and Lenny, two guys that I've known. I played hockey with Lenny. And believe me, Boston College is blessed. John introduced them both. Boston College is blessed with two of the finest coaches that there are in college athletics. You know, if you read any of the sports magazines, you see many times that there are things going on in collegiate sports that you don't like to see. There are all types of recruiting violations, support for athletes on campus, cars, money, what have you, by alumni and so forth. These two men that are to my left are two of the finest coaches in American collegiate athletics. Lenny Siglasky, as John mentioned, has won almost 600 games. But he has set an example as a coach. I have never heard one thing about his players, about the way they're recruited, the way they conduct themselves on campus. The same thing with Jack Bicknell. He travels all over the country to recruit football players. He has set one of the finest examples, and as a man, he's like a father to the team that he coaches year in and year out. And you know, the test of the mettle of a great coach is how he reacts, how he conducts himself when maybe things aren't going so well. This past year, unfortunately, was one which maybe Jack didn't have a Cotton Bowl year. But the way he conducted himself, the way he supported those kids, and the way he represented Boston College, to me, that's a sign of a great coach and a great person. Thank you very much, Jack. The girls who are here from the Saltmarsh Insurance Agency, it's mentioned they don't want me to come back. Maybe I'll come back on a part-time basis, guys. But I want to thank them very much. You know, it's hard to have an absentee owner, and they were able to work and carry on the business of the day, particularly the years I've been in the legislature. I'd like to thank Masha for running the agency, doing things. She's been involved in the business since I started it. It's very helpful to me in the last election. And I want to thank her again for what she's done to be supportive of me over those many years, particularly the last few years. Mario Ciroli. Mario Ciroli is the gentleman who owns this building. I'd like to give him a big round of applause. I think we had a wonderful dinner. I want to thank the committee, Jerry Pocari, who is the chairman. I'd like to thank Kathy Alexander, Connie Pappas, my campaign manager 2 years ago. He really knows how to pick winners. He was my campaign manager, he won. You turn around this year, it was Paul Casey's campaign manager, he won. Anybody needs a guy who's a winner, take John. I want to thank you, John. Young guy. Where are the staff members from the House? I want to thank the members of our committee. You know, many times we hear criticism about our state employees. And I just want to say to you, and I'll say this to the Speaker and also to Charlie Flaherty, I think one of the greatest improvements we've made in state government is the quality of people who are involved in the staff support of the various committees in the legislature. I'd like to thank the staff members who are here tonight. They've been extremely supportive of me. They do a darn good job. They don't get the credit for what they do, but I think in my 14 years, if there's one area I were to look at in state government, vast improvement, it's been the area of our staff support in the legislature. Thanks very much. I want to thank Iris Holland. She came all the way down from the western part of the state, she and her husband. She's been in the legislature 16 years. And I know my colleagues over here will bear me out on this. If there's anyone who is the epitome